Okay, we're continuing with this book here, The Holy Grail of Wisdom Quotes by me, Pete Rogers. These quotes will be by authors with the last name Erikson and Erskine. Okay, the first one is going to be Donald Erikson, a couple statements about teaching. And what he says is, some of the worst teachers are highly certified. I can take you to the best teachers I've ever seen, and most of them are not certified. We don't have any evidence at all that what we do in schools of education makes much of a difference in teacher competence. I would say that public school teachers stink because of the system. Many of them are very nice and they mean well and they want to help the kids, but the way they teach the kids is designed to not help the children. The public schools are designed to waste time and make the children conformist and predictable and to sort of beat their imagination and enthusiasm out of them. They're evil. Okay, let's be honest. They give children amphetamines, so-called attention deficit. No young boy is designed to listen to some stranger lady he doesn't know babbling for 8 hours. We're not made for that. That's a very unnatural thing. And then it's all pointless and stupid. Like I said, anybody who's heard me talk, I had a terrible childhood experience when I was young. I would do the homework in 5 minutes and then I would want to joke around with my friends. I was suspended repeatedly. I was put into solitary confinement for 2 years where I had to sit by myself alone in a room because I was distracting the class. It was ridiculous, okay? At least I liked actually being alone. I could read a lot, but I was lonely for not seeing my friends. Anyways, there was nothing good about it. I talked to tons of young doctors and other young people, and I always ask them, what do you remember about school? And they never can tell me anything other than driver's ed, and typing, okay? And maybe one teacher that was nice to them and spent time with them like a friend. Why is your parents usually the best teachers? Because they care about you. They love you. They want you to learn. They tell you something useful. And you'll luckily, if you're lucky, run into a few mentors here and there. Okay, but school is not where you go to get educated. It's where you go to be. The reason why they force you to go to school is because they want you conditioned to be mediocre and stupid, okay? They don't want you free. If you read books like by John Taylor Gatto about how education was like in the 1800s, it was much better. People were more literate in the old days. They would routinely read these 700-page triple-decker novels. Nowadays, you can barely get somebody to read anything more than 5 minutes. Okay, I've had a lot of young people tell me, could I please make more shorts because my other long-form videos are too long for them, okay? All right, so I think school is fake. And like I said, too, all of pre-med education in the United States is fake. All the med schools are fake. Okay, now you say, oh, how could I say that? No, I know exactly what I'm talking about. They don't learn anything. They never learn anything about nutrition, epidemiology, toxicology, and all the things that start with the letter S. That's all the most important stuff for health. They basically teach them how to sell drugs, okay, how to sell drugs. Mass yielded a pill, send a bill, that's where the money comes from. So that's enough about schools. Next, Erikson is a psychologist. He says the best way to transmit information is always a story. Yeah, that's how you know also somebody's a good writer. When you read scientific papers, the typical sort of mopey, mediocre paper is a bunch of statistics and then a couple statements here or there that are really wimpy and passive voice, trying to sound objective, and they really just sound meaningless. All right, the best writers tell stuff as a story, like Douglas Kell. Iron behaving badly explains what free iron does in the blood. That's a good paper. Anytime you want to solve, our brain's designed to hear stories. It's not designed to process logic and long lists of information. It's designed to hear a story and get the sense of it. So you tell it in a story, people can remember it. That makes it more useful. Okay, Erikson, the more you know about yourself, the more patience you will have for what you see in others. Yeah, a lot of the path to wisdom is self-knowledge. The better you understand all your little feelings and quirks and you've analyzed them and thought them through, then you see them in other people and you get along with them better. Personality, too, is destiny. Yeah, I would say that's a big thing. And then he says, we are what we love. And that kind of goes like Goethe's statement that in order for a man to learn a complex topic, he must love it. Because the only way you're going to study and crank through all the nuance of a complex thing is that you really like it. You're willing to pay your dues. Okay, you don't learn much in school because you're usually studying to take a test. And that's not real learning. In real life, we learn something when we want to know. Okay, I was a wrestler. I wanted to learn technique because I wanted to win the match, okay? That stayed with me. I still remember the technique. I could still teach it. I coached high school for a while because I know it. I coached college for a while too, and it was fun to coach. What I'm trying to say is when you care about something, you remember it for life. All this stuff I talk about in nutrition, I remember it because it's useful. It's important to me. It's important to people I care about, all right? Personality, too, is destiny. Just that, you have to focus. The people I've seen do great things are the ones that they really wanted to be good at something, and then they just worked at it a lot because they were so enthusiastic about it, not just who wanted to get good grades. I know lots of people who got good grades and they just use that to get a job and make money, which is perfectly reasonable. But I mean, if your goal is to achieve at a high level in something, then you need more than just an external drive like getting grades. It has to come from inside. Okay, Milton Erikson, this guy's a psychiatrist. He says, life will bring you pain all by itself. Your responsibility is to create joy. And that kind of reminds me of the Oscar Wilde quote. Some people bring happiness and laughter into whatever room they enter, and other people remove it. So my mom was like somebody who always brought laughter and sort of joy into the room. Whenever she'd come in the room, cracking jokes, saying nice things, and that's a great way to go through life. I kind of like, gee, my mom's a good way to be. Everybody liked my mother, okay? So that was the thing I learned. My father was a psychiatrist, and he was a very book smart guy. I'd read a lot and all that stuff, but he really didn't understand people anywhere near as well as my mother did. Okay, next quote from Milton Erikson. The most important thing in changing behavior is the person's motivation. Yeah, you can't push a person up a ladder. They have to want to get better. They have to be willing to change. Because what I've seen is, a typical patient, they'll sign a consent form in 2 seconds for chemotherapy, craniotomy, open heart surgery, but then you tell them you should try low-fat vegan diet. They're like, oh no, doc, I don't think I can do that. That's the only thing that'll save them. So they have to be willing to give up their bad habits. They also have to be willing to blame themselves. A lot of people, they can't handle blaming themselves, but the best thing in the world is that it's your fault and you can do something about it. You can't change something you screwed up 20 years ago, but you can change, your diet and your exercise habits. And you should be glad that most disease is due to your diet and your exercise and your toxins, your exposure, because you can change that. So change it, and instead of being offended all the time, just say, okay, I made a mistake. Now I know what to do. I'll do better. Okay, let's see. More often, change will lead to insight far more than insight will lead to change. Yeah, you got to get started doing something. Okay, what's easiest to see is often the most overlooked. Yeah, the most obvious things, people don't get them. In my experience, it's just sad. Most people kind of go through life like a dumb animal and don't really understand even the most basic things. I mean, the most basic things. Okay, the reason there's fluoride and aluminum in your water is because the people who make that water hate your guts. Okay, you wouldn't do that to the water if you didn't hate the people who drank it. All right, so once you realize that, then they're not going to help you. Okay, then you go to the doctor and you know that all the treatments they give for the common chronic diseases, over 70% of diseases, obesity, coronary artery disease, diabetes, hypertension, atherosclerosis, autoimmune disease, never cure the patient. Why would it be that they never cure the patient? Maybe it's because they want to sell them drugs. Okay, once you realize they're primarily interested in selling you drugs, or that's all they know, then all of a sudden, and you learn that you could cure yourself with a low-fat vegan diet most of the time, why wouldn't you do that? But that's simple stuff. It just requires 2 + 2 = 4. Okay? That's the other thing, too, like the Solomon Asch studies. Basically, you put most people in a room where there's one research investigator and then there's like 10 confederates with the investigator, and there's one person by themselves, and they all say something that's not true, like the short line is longer than the short line is longer than the long line. Something stupid, okay? And almost all people will cave just to go what the group does. Okay, and people can call me stuck up, but I'm very kind of confident in myself, okay? Because I've been to all these places, Stanford, Harvard, and I've read all their books, and they suck, okay? So that's why I don't cave too easy. If somebody convinces me with good logic, yeah, I'll believe it. But I usually pretty much have contempt for what stupid people say, and I think that's a good thing. So you don't get dragged into nonsense, because most people don't age well, and they have a lot of bad habits. So you want to learn to trust yourself, but you have to build up the confidence and track record that you can do it. But what I'm trying to say is it's kind of good to be stuck up, because if you're not stuck up, you get pulled into drinking, pulled into eating bad food, pulled into all kinds of stupidity. So learn to develop confidence in yourself if you want to be successful. The great people I know, they're all kind of a little bit egomaniacs and stuck up. And I think they have to be that way. And that protects you from nonsense. Okay, next quote of Erikson. A goal without a date is just a dream. Okay, yeah, you got to make yourself go for it. And you got to do a lot of things fast, unfortunately, because there's just not enough time. And if you don't do them fast, you're not going to do them. Okay? Like people sometimes say to me, how come your book had a typo in it? And I'm like, look, pal, I had 3 days, I have a couple days off, and I'll work 12, 14 hours a day to crank out a book. And I'm just going to have a couple typos. I can't escape that, okay? And if I didn't do it super fast when I write a lot of these books, I would never write the book. So I just have to accept there's going to be a couple typos. That's life. Okay, Caldwell Erskine, he said, a writer is not a great thinker or a philosopher. He's a storyteller. Well, that's, maybe him himself. And it's also true, a lot of writers, they're storytellers. And think about the people you liked in high school, guys who would tell funny stories. Okay, they're good storytellers. They're funny. But anyways, there is some truth in that too. Sometimes you'll see that a book like Victor Hugo, he doesn't have that many great quotes, but the whole story itself is majestic and wonderful. Okay, John Erskine. John Erskine was an English professor and a writer. And he said, when you write, you make a point, not by subtracting as though you sharpened a pencil, but by adding. The modifier is the essential part of any sentence. Okay, so where this comes from, John Erskine, he was a real skillful writer, but he influenced another guy named Christensen who wrote Notes Toward a New Rhetoric. Christensen was this teacher of English at University of Southern California, and he came to the conclusion that college English professors, they all stink, okay? And why did he say that? He said that because he goes, how come if college English professors know so much about literature, how come almost none of them are any good at writing? Okay, he says, maybe it's because what we teach is wrong. We don't know what we're talking about. So what he did was he read all these books that were sort of, he considered good literature. Okay, and then he started looking at the sentence structure of the great writers. And what he found out was that Erskine was correct. Basically, they throw in a little modifier into the sentence, like when you would talk to a friend. You know that girl, the one with the red glasses who always walks like this and wears that dress? And that's how you actually talk to a friend. You throw in these little modifiers, and that kind of makes it more interesting. The modifier is what makes a sentence interesting most of the time, especially if it's really detailed, precise, and unique. Okay, so he says if you want to be a good writer, again, it comes down to just act like you're talking to an intelligent friend, and you want to have a fun, good time telling a good story. And your writing will match that, and it'll be good. But that's where it comes from. It doesn't come from grammar. Nobody cares about grammar. Your writing can be very entertaining with lousy grammar, lousy spelling. If it's got a feel for it, if it's got love and joy and laughter and cleverness in it, then it's good. Okay? And if it has perfect grammar but no feeling or truth in it, then it sucks. Okay, a beautiful woman is one I notice. A charming woman is one who notices me. Okay, so that's all we got for today. Hope that was helpful.